You really think I'm going to keep letting you drain my retirement account? You've never contributed a dime to this family. From now on, you pay your own way. Groceries, utilities, everything. I'm done carrying you. That was my son-in-law standing in my kitchen on Christmas Eve. I was 63 years old, holding a dish towel, and for a moment I genuinely couldn't speak. Not because I was hurt. Not yet, because I was doing the math. Let me back up. My name is Vivienne. I'm 64 now, retired schoolteacher, 31 years in the classroom teaching 4th grade. I did live, in a 2-story colonial in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that my late husband Chester and I bought in 1989 for $112,000 and paid off completely by 2011. The house is mine. It's in my name. Has been since Chester passed 8 years ago. My daughter Renee is 41. She married her husband, my son-in-law, in 2016. I'll call him what he is, the problem. His name is Kent. After Chester died, I was alone in that big house for about 2 years, rattling around in 4 bedrooms, cooking for one, mowing a lawn that felt pointless. Renee suggested I let her and Kent move in. Help with the upkeep, she said. Company for me, she said. Kent was between jobs at the time, something in logistics that had fallen through, and they were in a 1-bedroom apartment that was costing them $1,400 a month. It made sense on paper. I said yes. That was 5 years ago. In those 5 years, I want to be honest about what I observed. Renee works hard. She's a dental hygienist, works 4 days a week, brings home around $52,000 a year. She helps around the house. She's considerate. She leaves a note if she uses the last of the coffee. She is my daughter, and I love her. Kent is a different story. Kent found a new job in logistics about 8 months after they moved in. Regional account manager, decent salary. He never told me the exact figure, but I estimated somewhere around $68,000 based on what he let slip. From that point on, he contributed $600 a month toward what he called household expenses. $600 in a house with a $340 monthly property tax bill, a $180 monthly electric bill in summer, a $95 gas bill in winter, and groceries that I largely purchased because I was the one home most of the day. I never said anything. That's the truth of it, and I'm not proud of it. I smiled and said it was fine, and I meant it at first. It was company. It was noise in the house. Renee brought me soup when I had my hip procedure last spring and sat with me through 3 episodes of whatever British mystery series we were watching. Those things mattered. But Kent had a habit of talking about money the way some men talk about sports, with tremendous authority and no real knowledge. He had opinions about my grocery choices. He told me once, very seriously, that I shouldn't buy the store-brand oatmeal because the name brand was nutritionally superior. I did not point out that I had been feeding a family on a teacher's budget for 30 years and probably understood oatmeal. I just nodded. He had opinions about my utility usage. He mentioned twice that I left lights on in rooms I wasn't in. He was not wrong. I am 63 years old and I will leave a light on if I feel like it. He told Renee, and she told me, uncomfortable about it, that he felt like they were subsidizing my retirement. That phrase sat in my chest like a stone for weeks. Subsidizing my retirement in my house that I own. Then came Christmas Eve. I had been cooking since 10 in the morning. My sister and her husband were coming, Renee's friend from work and her new boyfriend, and Kent's mother, whom I'd invited because she'd mentioned she had no plans and I couldn't in good conscience leave her alone on the holiday. So 8 people. I'd made a crown roast of pork, green bean casserole, sweet potatoes, a cranberry relish from scratch, 2 pies, and a cheese board I'd assembled the night before. I'd spent $340 at the grocery store that week, which was high, but it was Christmas. Kent came into the kitchen around 4 in the afternoon while I was checking on the roast. He poured himself a glass of eggnog, the expensive bottle I'd bought, and leaned against the counter. He had a look on his face that I'd seen before, the look that meant he'd been thinking about something and was about to share it whether I wanted him to or not. He said he'd been reviewing their finances. He said he thought the arrangement in the house had gotten unbalanced. He said that with my pension and my Social Security coming in, I was doing fine and didn't really need them to contribute as much as they were. I want to be very precise here, because I was precise in that moment, even though I wanted to set down the dish towel and walk directly out the front door. I asked him what he meant by, as much as they were. He said that $600 a month was a lot, considering. Considering what? I asked. Considering that I had a paid-off house and a steady income and, he said, and this is the part that did it, you've really never had to pull your weight financially the way working people do. I'm a retired public school teacher. I worked from age 22 to age 53. I paid into Social Security for 31 years. I helped pay a mortgage. I raised a child. I cared for a dying husband for 14 months without hiring a single outside aid because we couldn't afford it and because I would not have wanted to anyway. I pulled my weight. I said, I see, and I went back to checking the roast. Dinner was fine. Everything tasted good. Kent's mother said the cranberry relish was the best she'd ever had, which Kent did not acknowledge at all. My sister caught my eye across the table once and raised her eyebrows just slightly, the way sisters do when they are asking a question without words. I shook my head just slightly. Later, that night, after everyone had gone home and Renee was in the shower and Kent was watching something in the living room, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad. I am old-fashioned about certain things. I think better with a pen. I started writing numbers. Property tax, $340 a month. Mine, always mine. Kent had never once offered to contribute to it. Homeowner's insurance, $127 a month, also mine. Internet, $89 a month. I had added a faster plan when they moved in because Kent worked from home occasionally and complained the original plan was too slow. Groceries, I sat with this one a long time. I buy groceries. I cook most of the meals in this house. I had never thought to track this carefully before, but I started going back through my bank statements on my phone, cross-referencing with the grocery receipts I kept in a folder in the utility drawer. Another old habit from tight years, and I found that I averaged $680 a month on groceries for 3 people, which meant if I were buying only for myself, I'd spend perhaps $280. The difference, $400 a month, was what I was absorbing for them without it ever being discussed. Household supplies, detergent, paper towels, cleaning products, light bulbs, the good dish soap Ken preferred. Another $90 a month at least. The internet upgrade, $30 extra a month for 2.5 years. That was $900. Kent's dry cleaning, twice. I had offered to pick it up when I was running errands and had paid for it without thinking, $47 each time. The gas bill the winter they moved in was $240 one month because Kent ran the heat at 74 degrees, and I hadn't wanted to make him uncomfortable in my own home. I kept writing. My handwriting got smaller as the pages filled up. I thought about the guest room they used as a home office. I had bought a new desk for it when they moved in, $210, a proper one so Kent would have a good workspace. I'd bought a new office chair too, because the old one had a wobbly wheel, $155. I thought about the time Renee mentioned their car needed new brakes, and I had said, without hesitating, let me help with that, and written them a check for $400. I thought about Thanksgiving 2 years ago when I had asked Kent and Renee to pick up the turkey and the wine, and Kent had come home with a $14 bottle of wine, 1 bottle for 6 people, and a frozen turkey. And I had looked at that frozen turkey and quietly gone back to the store myself the next morning and bought a fresh one. By midnight I had several pages of notes and a total that made me set down my pen and look at the ceiling for a moment. In 5 years, accounting for what I could document and conservatively estimating what I couldn't, I had contributed approximately $89,000 to the household beyond what they paid in. $89,000 to live in my own home. The $600 a month they paid me over 5 years came to $36,000. So I had, in practical terms, paid them $53,000 to live here, or close enough to it. I was not angry, sitting there at the kitchen table at midnight. That surprised me. I thought I would be angry. Instead, I felt something cleaner, something clarifying, the way the air feels right after a big storm. I had a pension of $2,100 a month from the school district and Social Security of $1,340 a month, combined income of $3,040 in a paid-off house. I was, as Kent said, doing fine. I didn't need them. I had never needed them. I folded up my legal pad pages and put them in my purse. Then I went to bed. I slept very well. In the morning, Christmas morning, I got up early and made biscuits. I do this every Christmas. Chester's mother's recipe, lard and white lily flour, the kind that only exists in the South. Renee came downstairs in her robe and hugged me from behind and said it smelled like her whole childhood. I held her hands for a moment. She has her father's hands. Kent came down an hour later and poured the last of the coffee without starting a new pot. Then he asked what I was planning for dinner that evening. I told him I was planning to make myself a bowl of soup and that they were welcome to cook whatever they liked. He looked at me. "Are you serious?" I said I was. I said that I'd been doing a lot of thinking, and I agreed with him, actually, that the arrangement had become unbalanced. I thought everyone should be responsible for their own expenses. I thought that was very fair. Renee was watching me over her coffee mug. She had a look I recognized, the look she'd had at age 9 when she sensed something large was happening but didn't yet know what. Kent said he thought I was taking what he said out of context. I told him that was all right, that I was simply adapting to the new framework. The first thing I did on December 26 was call my attorney. I have had the same estate attorney since Chester died, a woman named, well, I'll call her my attorney. Practical, direct, has no patience for nonsense. I explained the situation. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Vivienne, you know you can ask them to leave." I said I knew that. I said I wasn't ready to do that yet. She said she understood and that when I was ready, she'd have the paperwork done in an afternoon. The second thing I did was call the internet provider. I downgraded the plan back to the original speed. Kent worked from home maybe twice a week. He had a perfectly functional, employer-provided hotspot. He would be fine. The third thing I did was stop buying groceries for 3. I want to be accurate about what that looked like because I don't want to make it sound like I was performing some great theatrical gesture. I wasn't. I was simply buying what I needed for myself. A rotisserie chicken from the deli counter, vegetables for roasting, the good coffee I liked, the medium dark blend from the local roaster that I'd stopped buying when they moved in, because I thought it was an extravagance when I was buying groceries for the household. I bought myself that coffee again. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of it on the 28th of December and felt something I can only describe as reclaiming a small territory. Kent noticed by New Year's Eve. He opened the refrigerator and stood there for a moment, looking at what was and wasn't there. Then he turned around. "There's no food." I told him I'd bought food for myself, and there was a very good grocery store 7 minutes away. "You're not cooking anymore." I told him I was cooking for myself every day and finding it very pleasant. He tried a different approach. He said he had a long week at work coming up, and it would really help if there was something to come home to. He said this in the way people say things when they'd never once considered that the thing they're asking for requires another person's time and effort and money. I told him I hoped his week went smoothly. He went and got McDonald's. I made myself lemon pepper salmon with roasted asparagus and a glass of the white wine I'd been saving for an occasion, and I decided that not having this conversation anymore was occasion enough. Renee came to find me later that evening. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and she was quiet for a moment in the way she gets when she's choosing her words. She said she wasn't sure what was happening, but that she could feel something shifting. I told her the truth, not all of it, but the important parts. I told her what her husband had said to me on Christmas Eve. I told her the word subsidizing. I told her about the legal pad. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Mama, why didn't you say something?" I said I hadn't wanted to make trouble. She pressed her lips together, the way she does when she's trying not to cry. She said, "He doesn't get to talk to you like that in your own house." I told her that was true, and that I was simply making sure everyone understood what was whose. Renee started paying for her own groceries that week voluntarily. She didn't make an announcement about it. She just started leaving her grocery bags in a separate section of the refrigerator and started making dinner for herself and leaving enough for two sometimes. She was working something out internally. I gave her space to do it. Kent took another 2 weeks to fully grasp what was happening. It was a Tuesday evening in mid-January when it crystallized for him. He'd come home late, gone to make a sandwich, and found the bread I'd been keeping was mine. I wasn't standing guard over it, but he knew by then that it was mine and that I had not offered. He ordered a pizza. While he waited for it, he came into the living room where I was reading and sat down on the other end of the sofa. He said he thought we needed to talk about the house. I said I was happy to talk about the house. He said he wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable here. He said the arrangement seemed to have gotten tense. I put my book down. I looked at him directly, the way I looked at a fourth grader who was trying to negotiate their way out of something. I told him that I agreed the arrangement needed revisiting. I told him that the going rent for a 4-bedroom house in our neighborhood was between $2,800 and $30 or $100 a month. I told him they were welcome to stay and that I thought a fair contribution, given market rates and the fact that utilities and property taxes remained entirely my responsibility, would be $1,800 a month. I told him I thought I was being more than reasonable. His face went through several stages. I recognized most of them from my years in the classroom. He said that was more than double what they were currently paying. I agreed that it was. He said that seemed like a significant change. I said that it represented a change, yes, and that the timeline for implementing it was flexible, but that I did think it was fair. He said he'd talked to Renee. I picked my book back up. I am not going to pretend the next few weeks were comfortable. They weren't. Kent was terse at breakfast and overly polite at dinner in the way people are when they're simmering. Renee and I talked more than we had in years, partly because the tension in the house made us both want something warm to hold on to, and partly because things were shifting between us in a way that felt, underneath the discomfort, healthy. She told me she hadn't known about the $400 I'd given them for the breaks. She hadn't known about the desk I'd bought. She hadn't known the grocery bill had been $680 a month. She said very quietly that she thought she'd let herself not know. I told her that was honest, and that I thought it was all right, and that I loved her. Then the event I had not anticipated. Kent's mother called me in the 3rd week of January. I liked her, genuinely. She was a retired bookkeeper from Knoxville, sharp and unsentimental in the best way. She had lost her own husband young and managed her own finances with what I could only describe as professional precision. She called on a Sunday afternoon and asked if she could come for coffee. She arrived with a coffee cake from the bakery on Broad Street and sat down at my kitchen table and got straight to the point, which is what I liked about her. She said her son had called her, upset, complaining that I had changed the rules and was making things difficult. She had asked him several questions. She had done some thinking. She said, "Vivienne, I want you to know that I'm embarrassed." I told her she had nothing to be embarrassed about. She said, "He has been living in your house, in your paid-off house, and contributing $600 a month." She said it flatly, like a bookkeeper reading a line item. I didn't know the details. I should have asked. $600. You could rent a room in a college dormitory for more than that. I didn't say anything. I just poured us both more coffee. She said, I didn't raise him to behave like a tenant who thinks the landlord owes him a discount. I said that I thought people sometimes fell into arrangements without thinking carefully about what was fair. She said, Vivienne, he told you that you don't pull your weight. I said that he had said something to that effect. She set down her coffee cup. You were a teacher for 31 years. You owned your home. You cared for your husband alone. And he sat in your kitchen and said that to you. She shook her head slowly. I'm going to have a conversation with my son. I told her that wasn't necessary. She said, it is. Not for your sake, for his. She left 2 hours later with half the coffee cake for me to keep and a look on her face I recognized. It was the look of someone who has made a decision. Whatever she said to Kent, I don't know and didn't ask. What I know is that he knocked on the doorframe of the living room 2 evenings later when Renee was at her book club and stood there for a moment before speaking. He said he owed me an apology. I waited. He said what he said on Christmas Eve was wrong. He said he hadn't been thinking about what I'd contributed to the household and had only been thinking about the $600 and how it felt like a lot from where he was sitting. He said he'd talked to his mother and she had helped him understand the fuller picture. He said, and I give him some credit for this, that the fuller picture was not something he was proud of. I told him I appreciated him saying so. He asked if we could work something out that was fair to everyone. I told him I thought $1,800 was fair. I told him that if $1,800 felt too high, I understood, and that I could also understand if they needed to find their own place, and that I held no bitterness about either outcome. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said they would pay the $1,800. I told him the first payment would be due the 1st of February and that I would prefer it by bank transfer. He nodded. He started to leave, then turned back. He said, I think I've been taking a lot for granted. I said, yes, I think so too. That was it. No dramatic reconciliation, no tears. Just a man standing in a doorway who had finally heard something true about himself. February's payment came on the 1st by transfer, exactly $1,800. March's came the same way. I stopped keeping the legal pad calculations. I kept the pages filed in the folder with the grocery receipts, but I stopped adding to them. The accounting was finished. What changed was slower and more interesting than the money. Kent started cooking dinner on Thursdays. He wasn't very good at it at first. He made a chicken stir-fry in early February that was genuinely puzzling, but he kept trying. He asked Renee to teach him her pasta, and then he asked me to show him my biscuit recipe, and I did, one Saturday morning standing at the counter, together with flour on both of us, and it was fine. It was more than fine, actually. He had my late husband's same look of concentration when he was learning something new, and I didn't tell him that. Things are quieter now. Not the tense quiet of those January weeks, but the real quiet of a house where people understand their place in it. Renee and I have dinner together on Sunday evenings, just us, while Kent watches football. We talk about things we haven't talked about in years. Her childhood memories, Chester, what I want to do with the house someday, whether I want to put in a proper garden in the back, whether I might want to travel. She is making plans too, she says. They're talking about buying their own place in the next 2 years. She says it in a way that sounds like something decided together, not an escape hatch, and I'm glad for that. I won't pretend I don't think about the $53,000 sometimes. I do. I think about it the way you think about water that's already gone under the bridge. You can acknowledge it was there without standing in the river. What I think about more is the legal pad. Those pages full of numbers, written at midnight on Christmas Eve by a 63-year-old woman who had spent 5 years telling herself it was fine. The thing about fine is that it's not always false when you say it. I genuinely didn't mind the cooking most of the time. I genuinely liked the company most of the time. But something about saying it over and over made me forget to notice when it stopped being true. I notice now. My sister came to visit in March, and we sat on the back porch in the late afternoon light, and she said I seemed different. She said I seemed more like myself. I told her I thought I probably was. She asked what had happened, really, because I'd only given her the outline over the phone. I told her the whole thing, the Christmas Eve kitchen, the legal pad, the coffee cake on the kitchen table, and a bookkeeper from Knoxville who had more integrity than her son. My sister laughed. She said, "Vivienne, you know what you did." I asked, "What?" She said, "You stopped subsidizing something that didn't deserve it, and everything got honest." I thought about that for a while. The afternoon light was coming through the oak tree in the back, the one Chester planted when Renee was born, and the yard was starting to turn green the way yards do in Tennessee in early spring. I thought about Chester and what he would have made of all this, and I decided he would have shaken his head at me for letting it go on as long as I did, and then made some joke that made me laugh. That's what he did. That's what I miss most, the particular way he could make me laugh even at myself. But I'm all right. I'm more than all right. I'm 64 years old. I own my home outright. I have a pension and a social security check and a rose bush I've been meaning to plant along the back fence since October that I'm finally going to put in this weekend. I have a daughter who sat at my kitchen table last Sunday and said, "You know, I think I needed to watch you do this," and I wasn't sure exactly what she meant, but I think I understood it anyway. The thing about getting older that no one tells you when you're young is that it comes with options if you've been careful, not just financial options. Options about what you will and won't accept. I spent 31 years in a classroom being told that teachers should be grateful for what they have. I spent 5 years in my own house being made to feel like a burden. I am done accepting the premise of either of those things. The rose bush I picked out is a knockout variety, deep red, practically maintenance-free. Chester would have said I was picking it because I'm lazy. He wouldn't have been entirely wrong. But they bloom from May through November, and I intend to sit on my back porch every evening this summer in a house that belongs entirely to me and watch them bloom, and I think that's enough. I think that's exactly enough. I still have those legal pad pages in a folder in my utility drawer, right next to the grocery receipts I've kept since my 20s. I don't look at them often, but I know they're there, and that matters to me in a way that's hard to explain. What I've come to understand, not from a book, not from anyone telling me, but from sitting at my own kitchen table at midnight doing arithmetic, is that how we treat people has a way of coming back around. Not as punishment, not as some cosmic scorecard, just as consequence. Kent didn't set out to be unkind. I genuinely believe that. He set out to be comfortable, and comfort has a way of making people blind to what it costs someone else. When I stopped absorbing that cost quietly, when I simply stopped, everything became visible. The numbers, the years, what had actually been happening in this house. You can't unsee that, and neither could he. I think about the 3 things that got me through this, and I think about them in practical terms because that's who I am. The first is knowing right from wrong and acting on it even when it's easier not to. I knew for 2 years, maybe longer, that the arrangement was unfair. I knew it the way you know a shoe doesn't fit, not dramatically, just constantly. What took me so long wasn't ignorance. It was the old habit of keeping the peace at my own expense. Integrity isn't only about the big moments. It's about the small decision at midnight to finally write the number down. The second thing is clear thinking. I am a numbers person by temperament, not by training. And when I sat down with that legal pad, I wasn't angry, I was precise. $89,000 is not a feeling, it is a fact. I think the reason people stay in unfair situations for so long is that they keep the accounting vague on purpose, because specificity is uncomfortable. When I made it specific, everything changed. I could not unknow what I knew. Kent could not argue with a spreadsheet the way he could argue with a feeling. The third thing is the hardest one to name, but I'll try. It's the willingness to hold your position even when it's uncomfortable, even when the person across from you is simmering, even when you love someone in the situation and you don't want to cause them pain. Renee is my daughter. I would do almost anything to protect her from difficulty, but protecting her from the truth of what was happening in this house would have been its own kind of harm. Staying soft and absorbing everything was not kindness. It was avoidance dressed up as generosity. Kent's mother drove over with a coffee cake and told me she was ashamed of her own son. That took something in her, something real. She could have called me and been politely sympathetic. Instead, she sat at my table and said what was true. I have thought about that often since. The people who actually help you are rarely the ones who tell you what you want to hear. I'm 64 years old, and I'm planting a rose bush along the back fence this weekend. Chester planted that oak tree in 1983 when Renee was born. I figure the rose bush is mine. Some things you can only do for yourself. And those, it turns out, are often the things most worth doing.